Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. Alternate broadcasts usually stink. Let's just call it for what it is. Alternate broadcasts designed for kids usually are terrible, unwatchable, and downright insulting. Many have tried their hands at it, only for it to constantly fail. The Dude Perfect broadcast somehow finds a way to get worse and worse every single installment, while the Toy Story broadcast this past season, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, was quite literally unwatchable, as there were many points during the telecast where you could not see the game that was unfolding, thereby defeating the entire purpose of the broadcast. But the Nickelodeon broadcast, ever since its creation during the 2020 playoffs, has been nothing short of a godsend. In a world of terrible alternate broadcasts for kids, the Nickelodeon broadcast, the first of the bunch, feels like the one that's always been head and shoulders above the rest. It's a bold idea. Take this game and make it kid-friendly by adding weird graphics and slime and having the announcers talk to kids. And it's one that, I'll be the first to admit, I thought would backfire spectacularly and be a failure. When I tuned into the first Nickelodeon broadcast, I was expecting to tune in for 5 minutes just to witness this train wreck unfold before going back to the main telecast. Instead, I found myself hooked and stayed on the entire time. The broadcast was innovative, it was creative, it nailed its target audience perfectly, and was one of the biggest pleasant surprises in the history of the NFL broadcasting on television. And the Nickelodeon broadcast is powered on now for the 4th season, with this battle between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders on Christmas being the most recent edition of the broadcast, which is now, unironically, one of my most anticipated broadcasts of the year. I've done a review of this broadcast every single year, so if you want to check out the ones I did for the 2020, 2021, and 2022 editions of the game, cards will appear in the upper right corner over the course of the final 5 minutes of the video, and they'll also be in the description, so you can check those out to see how the broadcast has evolved and how my opinions have evolved over the years. But this year, Nickelodeon is doing not one, but 2 broadcasts, as they'll also be covering Super Bowl 58, so we'll see them again in less than 2 months. This is the appetizer before the main course. But I had to ask myself the obvious question when watching this broadcast. Was this any good? How did the 4th installment of the Nickelodeon broadcast and the 2nd ever Nick Miss hold up? Before I begin, I have to give a special shout out to a longtime fan of the channel named UPF Sonic. Usually the alternate broadcasts are available on NFL Plus immediately after the game concludes. That was the case with every Dude Perfect broadcast, and was the case with the past Nickelodeon broadcasts, but for whatever reason, NFL Plus did not upload it. So I checked Paramount Plus, because maybe it was like a Toy Story situation where Disney Plus had the replay of that game, but nope, there was nothing. So knowing that I needed the footage to do this video, otherwise nothing that I was talking about would make any sense whatsoever, I threw up a Christmas Day prayer and a shot in the dark to see if anyone somehow had recorded the game. And sure enough, UPF Sonic did. And he was kind enough to send me a recording of the game. I'm going to leave his channel link in the description. You can check out his channel by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Go check out his stuff because he was an absolute lifesaver with this one. And thanks again, man. You rock. I should say, way after the fact, NFL Plus has uploaded the full Nickelodeon broadcast. So if you want to watch it for yourself, you can now check it out there. But the fact that it took them over a full day to do it, when that has never been the case before, is somewhat ridiculous. I watched the game in real time, I watched it at 1 o'clock Eastern, but I need the footage afterwards so I can talk about it. So the NFL Plus, you dropped the ball there. UPF Sonic, thank you so much. Having said that, let's dive right in. One of my biggest concerns with this broadcast going in was, quite simply, no SpongeBob. Presumably because they're saving the sponge for the Super Bowl and don't want the 2 broadcasts to feel identical. Let's call it for what it is. SpongeBob is Nickelodeon's bread and butter, and has been for more than 2 decades. I grew up on SpongeBob, as did a lot of people. Early SpongeBob is one of my all-time favorite shows. I'll watch the SpongeBob Christmas special every year leading up to the holiday season. Band Geeks is maybe the greatest 11-minute animated television episode of all time in any show. So even if there were some things that I wouldn't ordinarily like, you know how it works. Your brain can excuse it because of nostalgia. But the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as in the theme for this year's broadcast, I don't really have any nostalgia or affinity or connection with them. I mean, I know what they are. I know the characters and know they live in the sewers and love pizza, and I had some of the video games and toys growing up, but I don't have that nostalgia and connection toward the Turtles like I do with SpongeBob. And this means that, at least for me, I can't use nostalgia as a crutch. This broadcast has to stand on its own. I didn't know before this broadcast if it was good because they were referencing and alluding to things I grew up on, or if it was good because it was a genuinely good broadcast, if that makes sense. And folks, my suspicions were confirmed correct after this year. This broadcast is a legitimately good broadcast. In fact, dare I say it, the fourth installment of the Nickelodeon broadcast might have been the best one yet. To the point where me saying a Nickelodeon broadcast was great is in the same vein as me saying a Dude Perfect broadcast is terrible. At this point, it's like a New York pizza slice shop. You know exactly what you're going to get, and I mean that in all the best ways. Because despite my lack of nostalgia and connection toward the product, and despite the fact that this was a close game, so you're not exactly as forgiving to it going off the rails as it is in a blowout, when you don't really focus on the game anymore, this broadcast was absolutely incredible. Big time cowabunga all the way around from me. My biggest concern when the broadcast was announced all the way back when the schedule came out was that Noah Eagle, the play-by-play man, was not going to be there, since he worked for NBC and was their #1 guy on college football. When Eagle started this gig, he was doing some stuff on the side and was calling games for the Los Angeles Clippers. But now, he's fully graduated to the big time, and is no longer one to watch out for as a possible rising star in the industry. He is a star. Part of what makes this broadcast great is that Noah Eagle and color commentator Nate Burleson have fantastic chemistry, feed off each other well, and know how to relate the game to kids while at the same time not dumbing it down to make them feel like idiots. And the fact that Noah was allowed to do this game was a pleasant surprise. So with him and Nate on the broadcast, I felt pretty comfortable with that element going in, and there were no surprises there. Noah and Nate were fantastic as always. What impresses me the most about this is just how quick they are on their feet. Calling a football game is one thing, but even though it might look easy, Noah and Nate have, by far, the hardest announcing job in football. Think of everything they have to do. On top of calling the game, they have to work a third person in the booth and into conversations, even though said person is a kid, has no experience behind a microphone calling a football game, and has no experience watching football. Nate has to break down the plays in a way that isn't just retelling what you saw, but can't be super detailed like you could be on the regular broadcast, because first-timers don't know the difference between man defense and zone defense, or jumbo sets, or anything along those lines. And he broke the game down in such a way, with great analogies like getting caught in the cookie jar, that made sense for kids, but at the same time, wasn't insulting to their intelligence. He taught people. He didn't dumb it down, and that's a big difference. It's a fine line, and he played it perfectly, just as he always has. Noah has to juggle a ton of different things at once, because not only does he have to call the game and focus on what's happening on the field, but he has to call it with the distractions that Nickelodeon throws his way, like Santa just randomly lining up at wide receiver, or the Yeti watching in the background, and he has to act like it's happening. He has to hit all of those beats and acknowledge them while working two people into the conversation, while calling the actual game, and while making references to Nickelodeon shows and properties. Trust me, it is not easy, and I honestly don't know any other play-by-play man that could pull it off like he does. And these references that he brings up are deep cuts that you wouldn't know unless you truly grew up on this stuff, or you did your homework beforehand. There was one part where Noah, without missing a beat, talked about how putting your pinky up makes you look fancy. Just a throwaway line from one of the very first episodes of SpongeBob that is never brought up again in the series, and he fit it into the broadcast effortlessly. It is genuinely impressive. What was also impressive about this broadcast was the course corrections they made in real time. You've seen me criticize the Dude Perfect broadcast many times before, and a big reason why is because of their stubbornness to not change what they're doing, even when it's not working, and even when it's very distracting. Nickelodeon, despite planning this for a year, recognized when things were annoying in real time. For the first few drives of the game, you had this weird thing where cookies were being thrown all over the place on the score bug. Even when there was a muff punt, you couldn't quite make out what was happening because of all the cookies. But for the final 3 quarters, or really 3.5 quarters, they course corrected and toned it down by a ton, only using that effect sporadically. Remember how for the second broadcast in Cowboys 49ers during that playoff game, how they used the slide blimp so often that it was distracting, and they didn't adjust course? Here, they adjusted course rather quickly, which I have to give them credit for. They didn't really add any new effects this year from previous years or special animations, presumably because they're saving them for the Super Bowl, and because this was an outdoor venue, which was the first time the Nickelodeon game has ever been outdoors, so there might be some things that wouldn't translate in the elements compared to a controlled environment like a dome, so there's nothing really to comment on there, but they did the job in a good way, just like previous installments. They hit all the notes you expected them to. Now usually, I have to preface all of these Nickelodeon videos by saying when the kids are on that everything I say, I'm talking about a child here. And I don't want to be too harsh on a child, because what they're doing in a live setting like this is incredibly tough. And I don't want to be a guy in his mid-20s criticizing a child, and yada yada yada. But I don't even have to do that here, because for the first time ever, all the kids were absolutely fantastic. Seriously. I criticized Dylan Schefter last year, especially when compared to previous silent reporters like Lex Lumpkin and young Dylan, for being a bit too stiff and nervous. But this year, the sideline reports were great. Her interview was great, she had charisma, she seemed a lot looser, and perhaps most importantly, unlike last year, she looked like she was having fun. And in the end, that's what the Nickelodeon broadcast is all about. Fun that doesn't come at the expense of the game itself. And she nailed it. Seriously, she did a fantastic job this year. And then, with the kid playing the turtle, Raphael, a kid by the name of Brady Moon, although I don't know if I can call him a kid since he's going to be turning 18 years old on December 30th. Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. This might be the best job that any kid has done in the booth. Being thrust into that spot is always a super weird dynamic, because on one hand, you want them to talk. You absolutely need them to talk, because otherwise, they serve no purpose. However, on the other hand, you don't want a situation like what happened with Gabby during the Cowboys 49ers game in the 2021 playoffs, where she's overpowering Noah and Nate, and where she's trying to offer actual football analysis. You want someone who's super charismatic, who is not mic shy, but who has a very good read of the situation, doesn't just jump in at random times, knows to stay in their lane, and is funny and can fit in seamlessly. And yeah, Brady did just that. It's actually insane how this kid, playing the turtle, has better chemistry with Noah and Nate than more than half of the broadcasting teams out there right now. I guess my one flaw, and it's not his fault at all, is that he talked about how he doesn't know a ton about the sport because they don't get football in the sewers.
Now, a lot of my brothers, we don't really understand too much football.
But number one, Patrick Starr lives literally under the ocean and is able to understand the intricacies of Russell Wilson's offense. That's canon. So how does Bikini Bottom know about the NFL but not the Turtles, who literally live in New York City, where 2 football teams play in the metropolitan area? So you're telling me that in the Nickelodeon cinematic universe, the Turtles don't know football, but sea creatures do? And then, you had Raphael saying that and trying to understand the sport, but you also had Donatello, another turtle, explaining penalties and what each call means. So they do understand football, or at least Donatello does, but Raphael doesn't, even though they live in the same sewer, and nothing about this universe and the logic here makes any sense, and man, I'm reading way too hard into the plot holes for a broadcast designed for children. But I've got to give Brady a ton of credit, because he absolutely crushed it here. He was funny, he was quick on his feet, there weren't any awkward pauses, and he could keep a conversation going, and very naturally. This truly felt like 3 buddies on a couch watching the game, and I mean that in the best possible way. That's one of the highest compliments you can give to someone, and that is what this broadcast was. So what are my criticisms with this broadcast? Because it was not perfect by any means. And before I even go any further, a lot of other praises, like how good the score bug is and whatnot, and even just how in-depth I've gone about Nate and Noah before, I'm not even going to comment on, since I would be repeating myself from previous installments of the game. It was more of the same, and that's a good thing. Trust me, if I wanted to, this video could be 30 and 45 minutes of things that this broadcast got right. So if I didn't comment on something, odds are I liked it, and I talked about it in one of the previous 3 reviews, probably last year since that was Christmas. But regarding criticisms, number 1, the introduction felt, shall we say, incredibly abrupt. Nickelodeon showed Hotel Transylvania before coming on the air with the game at 1 o'clock, and by 1:03, the game was kicking off. Usually with these kid-themed broadcasts, you have some sort of introduction just to explain the rules to everyone watching at home, or explain the importance of this game, or what the broadcast is going to be. But here, they pretty much just went right into it. CBS gets you on the field when you know what's happening, and know all the storylines for a 1 o'clock game at 12:50. And if this broadcast target audience is people that don't know the rules of the sport, and have no idea what they're going to be watching, they only get on at 1 o'clock? Yeah, it's a bit jarring. I think this broadcast absolutely would have benefited from going live at 12:45, just so it wasn't so abrupt, since it was somewhat jarring going from the green screen booth to the field in a matter of 5 seconds. Give the kids a chance to know the rules of the sport. But number 2, I have no problem whatsoever with the candy cane line as the first down line. That's cute, that's festive, and that's fun for kids. They have to cross the candy cane to get the first down. I like it. However, why is the line of scrimmage orange? When you see an orange line on the football field that is digitally imposed, what do you immediately think of? It's the first down line. They couldn't use any other color? Seriously? No other color besides orange? That was a mind twist and took a ton of adjusting, especially on plays where a player was behind the line, so the line disappeared for a bit. And then you see the line and think that's the first down line, but nope, it's just the line of scrimmage. Couldn't do a brown line that looked like gingerbread, or a white line of icicles, or something? Anything besides orange. Do not use orange, I beg of you. And number 3, just like last year, and seemingly most years of the Nickelodeon broadcast has been a thing, field goals are unwatchable. I don't get why they can't just go with the traditional angle, which is a shot behind the kicker, and then superimpose the graphics that way. They already do that for other football games by superimposing sponsors behind the net, and they don't go to this weird side angle where you can't tell whether or not the ball went in, and we're just blindly guessing until the image pops up, as though we're back to watching a game in the 1960s. It also led to a really bad moment where Harrison Butker missed a field goal, but the image indicated that it was good before switching to no good. If there is one singular pet peeve of mine with these broadcasts that I would change, if I could only change one thing, it's this. Have the traditional angles for field goals. It's not that hard, especially since you've done it before. I would also say that while I didn't hate the pre-recorded fan segments that showed fans getting slime when the blimp came around, or showed fans eating pizza when the pizza was dropped from the sky, I would change the camera and the lens so it looked like it was in real time, and not fake and very clearly pre-recorded. It was way too smooth. But in the grand scheme of things, there was a lot more that went right than went wrong. A lot more that went right. Before, when I've talked about the Nickelodeon broadcast and how I said I enjoyed it, you might have thought, well, he grew up on those shows, so of course he's going to say that because of the nostalgia element. But trust me, the Nickelodeon broadcast is legitimately good. It can stand on its own. I had no nostalgia or affinity to the product this year, and I loved every second of it. It is a legitimately fun broadcast that is well produced, that is announced better than the vast majority of the actual games for the NFL on their main broadcasts, and that is a well-polished product that I look forward to every year. Because the Nickelodeon broadcast this year was the true definition of turtle power. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.